No worries.
Wow. I did not know how apt this topic would be when this day came. So I'm the concept of radical acceptance felt like something I'd been working with personally for a long time. And I felt like it was time to dive a little bit deeper into this and share some of what's been helpful thus far. Yeah, especially with the news of our friend Lynn, who's transitioning. And I felt like it was important to start with some more realities that can be hard to take in, because that's where acceptance, that's where the rubber meets the road. It's easy to accept all the snow falling and our love of each other, but the hard things we tend to not want to let in as much. So things like, this is the 18th straight year that global freedom and democracy have declined. There's a significant increase in war and violence. There have been over 600 mass shootings per year in our country over the last 3 years. So almost 2 a day. AI came on the scene and the fears around that. And climate change stopped being a future threat. And widespread agreement now exists that we are no longer able to avoid the catastrophic pieces of how that will unfold. So this is the polycrisis that I mentioned in the description of this talk. And even though we live in a bubble of temperate climate and relative goodwill, we feel it. We feel this polycrisis. It's the emotional atmosphere of our planet, and we can't separate ourselves from it. We can't escape it. Our hearts can't escape it. And I'll be weaving in a lot of quotes from Martin Luther King, whose birthday is tomorrow. And he understood this ability not to be able to separate ourselves from what's going on anywhere. His beautiful quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. So this is Martin's ode to quantum theory. He really understood, this fabric of the universe that we are all a part of. And it's good news too, because our love and caring and forgiveness, all of those things affect that single garment of destiny. And we have a choice about what we want to contribute to that destiny, that garment. The night before he was assassinated, this is amazing to me. He was in Memphis giving a sermon. It was April 3rd, 1968. And he gave the I've been to the mountaintop speech. And it was such a beautiful and profound expression of his acceptance of his destiny. He said, like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And I'm so happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. You know, he had made, long before this, such a clear and courageous choice to accept whatever would unfold. And that gave him the freedom to really express his soul's purpose. You know, he didn't hold back anything, and he had accepted it all, whatever was going to come. And this is radical acceptance. It's honoring what is, honoring the reality that he might be killed. He was clear about the strong possibility that he would be killed. And at the end of the sermon, he said, God has allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. And I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. You know, that was the vision he had chosen. He had chosen that this was a done deal. The promised land was what he'd given his entire life to. You know, the piece about, you know, his vision of, you know, a reality where all people are judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin or anything else. He'd chosen that vision, and everything that he did was in service to that, whether he made it or not, even in the face of the violence and the lack of acceptance of him that he had experienced so much of his life. He also said, we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. You know, and there's so much discussion about hope. You know, should we have it? You know, is it naive? Does it keep us from being engaged and active? Because hope seems kind of passive. You know, Joanna Macy talks, and I've talked about this before, something called active hope, where we create that vision and dedicate ourselves to aligning our lives with that vision. That's when hope becomes a verb. And it's an expression of our deepest values and dreams for the world. So that's what Martin Luther King meant by infinite hope, is that it become this active expression that informed every one of our actions. So another thing Martin said was, we will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. You know, this was his call to action. Like, don't be silent. Don't keep your hope inside and quiet. Even though it exerts a force, I mean, our quantum understanding tells us that even thoughts and feelings exert a force on that garment of our destiny. But there's something about action. There's something about the alignment of action with vision that is the real special sauce. So acceptance isn't about remaining silent in the face of wrongdoing or violence. It's about not wasting time in victimhood. Because victimhood takes us out of the present moment and our agency. It shuts it down. When we accept reality, we can meet it with the power of our soul purpose. And that's a really important part of acceptance. It keeps us from struggling against reality, which is something that we're just sort of wired to do. It's our ego trying to keep us safe. And acceptance isn't about giving up or complacency. A posture of acceptance allows us to access wisdom and truth. When we let go of that struggle that keeps us engaged and, hyped up, when we let go of that, then we can hear, what do I really care about? What am I called to act in the service of, even in the face of what I'm accepting? And acceptance isn't about approval of an unwanted emotion or circumstance, like abuse. We can accept the reality of what happened without approving of the action. And sometimes it feels hard. It's like, if I accept this, it means I'm somehow complicit in it or something. And that's not exactly what happens. Acceptance allows us to be present enough for the healing that's then possible. So I want to share a practice that came to me around this. It's called Wu Wei. Some of you may be familiar. It's in Chinese, Wu Wei means doing nothing, which kind of sounds like a pleasant invitation to be lazy, but it's so not that. It's called the noblest kind of action, according to the philosophy of Taoism, and is at the heart of what it means to follow Tao, or the way. It's a flow state that's characterized by effortlessness, ease, and allowing the right action to unfold at the right time in the right manner. So it's not an easy thing because it takes a lot of practice to get to this point of being able to discern what is the right action. And again, that's very personal because it's tied to what we value. So getting clear about our values is a really important part of being even able to practice Wu Wei. And it's so foreign to Western enculturation and upbringing to stop struggling. You know, like that's how we we've been taught to measure our worth by how much we can struggle, you know, towards something that we care about. So to be able to drop that and to believe that seemingly intractable situations can be resolved with minimal effort is just, it's something that's still like a koan for me. I'm like, you know, I've been working with this for a long time, and it's not easy, you know, to let go and let God, you know, that's it's just not something we're very skilled at. And it takes a lot of faith and trust in the reality of a loving universe. Mm-hmm. That there's a plan. Not that it's a done deal necessarily, you know, although, you know, like that's something Martin Luther King believed in, that the promised land was, you know, like we're getting there. And maybe it's because of a belief in the evolutionary process, that's moving toward greater love, greater connection, greater self-actualization as a human species. Like that's what's at the end of this, whatever this is that we're engaged in and that we've signed up for as human beings. But the belief that the universe is a loving force, and it's not here to, there's no force here to like endlessly screw around with us and cause us suffering. It's, which it can seem like, you know. I mean, it would be easy to make a case for that. It's the trust is more so in the beneficence of it all, and that we are evolving towards something we can't even begin to imagine the beauty of. So in researching this talk, I found out something I'd never known before about Buckminster Fuller. After his daughter's death, this was the height of the Great Depression, and his daughter died, his beloved daughter, and he was bankrupt and, you know, just in a very suicidal place. And at one point, he decided, he just chose, in the face of all of this, you know, that would cause him to feel otherwise, he chose that he would pursue only things that he felt could contribute to changing the world and benefiting all of humanity. He just committed his life to that. And he was the son, and I didn't know this about him either, he was the son of a Unitarian minister. And so he undertook this experiment on the assumption that God would look after him. You know, that's also a choice, because we don't know that for sure. We don't know that there's any loving force looking out for us. But when you choose that, it makes life a lot more enjoyable, and I have a lot more agency, I find, when I come from that place. So every time he was in need of something, you know, material, money, help, he found that there were a series of miracles that would occur, just, at the right time, but not until the absolute last second. Yeah. And this is also how the Taoist idea of Wu Wei, of non-striving, works, delivering at the very last moment. So, doing his experiment, Fuller came to the conclusion that humans are here on planet Earth for problem solving. But he said that if we are any good at problem solving, we don't come to utopia. We come to more difficult problems to solve. And don't we find this, on our own spiritual paths, that the things we bump up against don't get more simple. Life doesn't become more easeful. Like, on some level it does, because if we get better at acceptance and things like Wu Wei, we bump up against those really confusing, crazy, challenging, heartbreaking things, and we don't allow them to reduce us to a puddle. Yeah. We can meet them with more grace, more trust, more creativity, more collaboration, because our ego isn't there, hopefully, telling us we've got to go it alone and we can figure this out on our own, and but we get more open to co-collaborators on our path, and the wisdom that we find in odd places that we might not have let it in before. We might, through our acceptance, be able to access greater depths of wisdom and truth than we have before. Like that has helped me so immensely to stop thinking that I've failed because my problems keep getting bigger. Our problems keep getting bigger. Maybe it's because we have a greater capacity to meet them. Maybe we're being graduated to the next phase of our evolution because we're ready. And we can accept that we're in a really complex sandbox. And that's okay. There's another, so parts of Wu Wei practice involve relaxation. So maybe like when we've got something really, really tough, that we can relax in the face of it. We can do whatever it is for us that puts us into a flow state. Maybe that's cooking. I often can access sort of a flow state when I'm cooking something that I love, or walking. Walking is one of those activities that engages both sides of the brain, and thus puts us into a really profound flow state. So whatever it is, swimming, same kind of thing, with water. Part of Wu Wei is also relaxing into the harmony of nature. So nature practices are really important because they allow us to drop into that flow state and the harmony that's experienced in nature. Another important part of Wu Wei is letting go of the results of our actions. This is also the seva practice in the Hindu faith. It's to give ourselves unconditionally to what we value. So putting ourselves in service to what we value most, but not judging the value of our service by the results that we experience. This is so freaking hard.
It is.
Because we are taught to be evaluators and measurers of our worth and of the value of our service. And our only job is to first know what we deeply value and then put ourselves in service to it. That's where it ends.
Thank you.
So there's another practice that's come on the scene. It's just a new name for something that's, all this ancient practice. I mean, Wu Wei is basically, the same kind of thing as the ACT training, ACT, which is called acceptance and commitment therapy or training, ACT. So the acceptance, it's a practice that allows us to be more psychologically flexible, which is something we really need in these times. To let go of the things that we struggle against and to let go of the negative patterning that is, that we all have. I wore this smoky quartz today because it helps with that. We have all these allies in our lives to help us with these things. But when we can let go of that, the negative patterning that we have, our reactions to certain things, and we're supposed to be, something happens and we start struggling against it. Something must be wrong. And this kind of training allows for enough flexibility to start to diffuse those ways of thinking and allow in some more creative thought, allow in our innate wisdom. And I've found this really helpful too, because it pairs acceptance with the commitment to act. The commitment piece is the commitment to do something. Like when you're encountering something that's difficult or confusing or that fills us with sadness, there's the acceptance piece of that. There's the making space for that. Oftentimes just allowing ourselves to be aware that we're in that place. Oh, here's a unwanted thought or an unwanted circumstance, and just being aware that that's what we're experiencing. That can often be enough to diffuse the pattern or the rabbit hole that we normally go down, and allow us to bring in some compassion for ourselves, for the circumstance, for the unwanted thought. Just the making space for it, the accommodating of the negativity. I love so much Rumi's Guest House poem, where, all unwanted guests are welcome.
Yeah.
It's like you just make space for them because they're not going to stay long. These thoughts are like the weather. If we, they're just on their way to something else. So we make space for them. We try to be as hospitable as possible. And it's a guest house. It's not a prison. A guest house is where we welcome people in.
Yeah.
We welcome our thoughts in, and we are kind to them. We give them something to eat. We give them some rest, and they're on their way. So that's what this training is about, is like to remember that our emotions are like weather. They're mutable. They're always changing. So we don't have to get hung up on them. We don't have to be afraid that this thought will take us down. It's just, if we can just watch it, it'll pass through. And then the commitment part is about making that commitment that no matter what negative thought happens, no matter what we do that we experience as a negative, that in the moment that we are aware of that, we are committing to doing something that will move us closer to what we value most. That's the commitment. And it's so powerful because those negative ruts rob us of our agency. That the ego wants to make us safe. So like be a victim. This negative stuff is happening. Be a victim. It's much safer there. But what that does is not allow us to fulfill on our soul's purpose. And that's never a safe place to be. It's never safe to get to the end of a life and realize we haven't acted courageously in support of what we care about most. That's not safe. So I want to end with something from Viktor Frankl. This book is so amazing. I mean, after so many times of reading it, I keep finding new things that jump out at me. So, I mean, and for those of you who maybe don't know him, he is a concentration camp survivor. And he was a psychologist. So he had the interesting experience of going through as an adult, going through the experience of the concentration camps, knowing what he knew about the human mind and psyche, and getting to watch it play out, and sort of doing his own research the whole time. So this was his response to a question about suffering and what we bring to it. So he questioned back, what about humanity? Are you sure that the human world is a terminal point in the evolution of the cosmos? Is it not conceivable that there is still another dimension, a world beyond man's world, a world in which the question of an ultimate meaning of human suffering would find an answer? So what he's talking about is this sort of fifth dimensional stuff that we're starting to realize is possibly where we're evolving toward, where all of what we've experienced as human beings breaks open into a whole new kind of experience where we possibly even leave our bodies behind and are relating on a whole different level. I don't know. But what Frankl is saying is that there may be something beyond what we feel like is possible in our Newtonian way of experiencing the material world and what we feel like is possible because of that. It starts to enliven quantum theory in a way that's so exciting, where love is experienced in a way we can't even really wrap our material world selves around. So there was one other piece of this. And this is how he ends the book. He says, in the concentration camps, in this living laboratory, and on this testing ground, we watched and witnessed some of our comrades behave like swine, while others behaved like saints. Man has both potentials within himself. Which one is actualized depends on decisions, but not on conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So this harkens back to, like making a decision in our lives, just taking a stand, choosing who we will be, no matter what the conditions are that we encounter, no matter the suffering that we may encounter, no matter how other people are choosing to act. We make a decision based on our most deeply cherished values, and we act in alignment with that. That is our greatest contribution to our evolution here on Earth and what's beyond, maybe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow.
I had a few thoughts come up from all of this.
Good.
Fancy that. In the Baha'i faith, it's called